So, right. Okay, so I do work for Devon County Council. I don't work for South Hams, so I won't be able to answer lots of questions about their collection, but I do have one slide on it, and I'll provide some links and things. But I work as part of the sort of behavioural change policy unit side of things. So my work is around education and communities, which is a lovely area to work in. And so I'm going to be talking to you about lots of these lovely pictures here. And I will also talk about some of the more sort of broader waste strategy type work in terms of, you know, where our recycling facilities are and things. So I'll just run through that. And then, I mean, it is a bit of a whistle stop tour because I could do it, you know, an individual talk on every area. So I will do my best to kind of cover it in 20 minutes. And perhaps it'd be good to give me a couple of minute warning, actually, because I do sometimes go on a little bit. So
okay, yeah, we can do that.
Excellent. All right, so let's start with just an image because waste is so much in people's minds at the moment and has been for several years. Before the pandemic, it was a big issue already with the David Attenborough effect. We were really noticing an uptick in our requests from schools and communities for more school visits and support and work. And it's images like this on TV that were making people think about it. And in fact, we found in schools that children, when we used to ask them where their waste went, they would sometimes say the tip, but now they say it goes in the sea. And that's like, oh, that's TV having that impact on them. So obviously we're working to make sure they know exactly where their waste goes and what happens to it. But images like this is Manila Bay in the Philippines. It's, you know, it's the sort of thing that people are obviously concerned about. And although we do have problems with waste in this country, there are more than 7 billion people on the planet, and we all produce waste every day. But a staggering half of that waste isn't actually collected, treated, or safely disposed of. So we're actually, although I know we're frustrated sometimes with our collections, especially if they go wrong, but actually we have to remember that so many people on the planet don't actually have any collections whatsoever, and there is a lot of open burning of waste that goes on, or it's thrown into rivers to carry it away from their communities. And I always like to put a little pitch in here for a great little charity called Waste Aid, who are working with communities to work with them to build and to tackle the waste issues in their area, not flying in and putting systems in place, but working with them on a grassroots level to build up. Anyway, a little pitch for Waste Aid there. If you ever want to Google them, that'd be great. Anyway, obviously climate change is a massive issue. So this is just a brief slide about not just climate change, but the biodiversity crisis as well. Because waste impacts on all these areas. So obviously everything we buy has a carbon footprint of its own, and people, when they talk about waste, often just think about where it's going after they've thrown it away, but actually we need to think about resources from the point of view of where it's come from and how much resources we've taken from the natural world and how much energy has been put into creating it. So there's that sort of embodied carbon in everything we use. And although I do promote recycling, you know, recycling actually isn't the long-term answer. We do need to take this much further up the waste hierarchy, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. And obviously there are methane emissions for when we landfill, although we don't landfill very much in Devon at all now, but obviously there are still lots of landfill sites being used, and methane is a major emission from organic waste from landfill sites. And there's obviously direct emissions from vehicles traveling around, collecting waste and then traveling off to reprocessing plants. Obviously, if we can reprocess it in this country, that's much better, and the vast majority of our material is. And burning of waste in incinerators, there is a carbon footprint. We can do visits to the energy from waste plants in Exeter when the COVID rules lift a bit. I know they have kind of lifted, but we haven't started doing tours there yet. But if you're interested in actually seeing it, then we can arrange a visit if you would like. And also we could arrange a visit to the Plymouth one, which would probably be more relevant to you because you're waste from South Hams, which is the residual waste goes there. So you might be interested in visiting that one. And I think they are going to restart their tours fairly soon. So obviously there is a CO2 emission. They do a huge amount about cleaning up all the things that we will worry about. So there's a huge amount of scrubbing that goes on to make sure that the various emissions are kept well below any standards that we need to be within. And but there still is a CO2 emission. We're going to have to look at how to get rid of that now. So that's the next big step for us, as well as reducing our waste, obviously. Okay, so obviously litter also has an impact on biodiversity in terms of everyday littering. Microplastics are a huge issue, and I know we don't always see them, but they are a huge issue. And the potential for pollution if waste is poorly managed. Now, we have very strict management guidelines and legislation in this country, but we're talking globally. We have a huge issue around waste that we need to deal with. And I always like to say waste is a symptom of the system. You know, there's a lot of wastage. It's not good. We do need to address the bigger resource issue here. So increasingly, we are going to talk about resource management, not waste management. So here's just a few statistics. This is effectively the boring slide. Hopefully you won't find it too boring. Devon County Council is a two-tier authority, which some of you may be well aware of. So that means that Devon County is responsible for sort of the planning and the waste disposal side of things, but your district councils are responsible for your collections and your street sweeping and things like that. And we work with 8 district councils across Devon. We've got a pretty big population, but we are a very large rural area, so there's a lot of transportation to travel around from site to site. Obviously, we've got a fair number of households. I shan't read out all the numbers, you can see them. We tend to work in terms of local authority collected waste, so that is household waste basically, but there is an element of a very small element of business waste just from some of the councils that have a collection there. Our recycling rate is 56.6%. That is actually the 1920 statistics. We can't quite give you the current statistics for 2021 yet. There's quite a long lead time because there's an awful lot of data to be gathered, because we do weigh everything that goes over weigh bridges. It has to go to DEFRA. There's lots of tonnage data, so we do know where materials go to quite small levels of tonnage. But I can't tell you those until they've gone to committee in October, so I'm very sorry. But anyway, that's a good recycling rate. We're proud. It's not, I know we need to do far more, but actually it's one of the best in the country at a county level, but we know more needs to be done, so we need to keep working at that. So obviously the recycling rate isn't 100%, so there is residual waste, around 150,000 tonnes, a little over that at the moment, and that goes to energy from waste plants. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. We have 19 recycling centres, and we have 58 closed landfill sites. People don't realise we have a duty of care, and we have a lot of landfill sites we have to look after from this historical landfilling in this country. So there's a lot to be done there. And our waste revenue budget is 38 million or around there. It's not the exact figure. And obviously it depends each year on how much waste people throw out, because we can't accurately estimate how much people will throw out every year, but it's around 38 million. And that doesn't include your district council collections. So there's a huge amount of money spent on managing waste. So drivers for change. We know we can't all keep throwing rubbish away. The waste hierarchy is the basic guiding principle of what we try to do. So obviously landfill is the least preferable option. So we try to move our way up the hierarchy. Recovery is where energy from waste sits. We know that's not ideal either. Recycling is obviously where a lot of people focus their efforts, but really we need to be focusing on reuse and reduce. And that's kind of where the education and the community work comes in. We've also got a huge amount of change going on at the moment in the waste sector. So we've recently had 4 consultations around consistency, which is called for same materials to be collected from the curbside across the country, because there is obviously differences across the country, and even in Devon, although we're trying very hard to change that. And there's a consultation on deposit return systems that called DRS. And the really important one, I think, is the enhanced producer responsibility. So that's about putting the responsibility of recycling and reclaiming materials back on the manufacturers who actually put it into the system already. Because at the moment we have to deal with whatever we're given, but actually we've been campaigning for a long time. I say we as in local authorities for years have been, wanting and working with brands and government to try and make sure that they carry more of the responsibility, because if an item's difficult to recycle, if they've got to recycle it, they'll actually change that. There's a lot of work going around that area, and that could be a whole talk in itself. I'm probably not the best expert in the detail of that consultation, but what I will say is that we are waiting for the environment bill to go through. It's working its way through Parliament very, very slowly, but that will help to put in place the legal requirements for these various consultations to become realities. But the final version from the consultations, I certainly haven't seen them yet. So, but they'll be out soon. But there's a lot of change coming as a result of these areas. And And plastic packaging, as you know, there's already been like the 5p tax on bags, which has gone up to 10p not so long ago. And they recently announced that they were going to put another ban on single-use cutlery and plates and polystyrene. It does mean a lot of companies are just shifting to biodegradable alternatives, which in themselves have some issues because we don't necessarily have the right collection facilities in place for them. So that's an interesting one. And then, of course, we've had COVID and a huge shortage of HGV drivers on top of all these other changes that are planned. So waste is a really interesting and changeable place to be working at the moment, particularly for the councils that are on the front line collecting the waste and trying to manage the disposal of it. But longer term, we need to go from this linear economy, which is raw materials just following through production use to basically being thrown away. It's very linear originally. And then we got slightly better at reusing and recycling. But really, we need this idea of a circular economy where products, we're not minimizing waste as little as possible, better still none, to zero waste, and keeping materials in the system. So I just wanted to share this to make you see the bigger scale of the issue of waste as well. So we're talking about household waste, and this figure is quite old, 2016, because it's quite tricky to find this figure. It's not reported on every year. And household waste is only 12% of the waste we're talking about. So this harks back to the thing I said about every item we use has a bigger footprint, so it will have gone through a commercial industrial process probably, or it may have come through had some element of construction or demolition involved in it. Who knows what the history of the item was, but there is more than just the element we throw away in our own household bins. And obviously the construction and demolition and excavation is a very large part of that, and very different waste stream to deal with. So this is just looking at Devon. This is just going back to household waste. So I took you out to the larger picture, but I'll take you back down to just Devon's waste now. Obviously, so our recycling rate was 56.6%. So you can see that that's made up between recycled and composted waste. There is a slight rounding here, so it will be a little bit different. Energy recovery, that is our energy from waste plants in Exeter and Plymouth, are doing 39%. Anaerobic digestion, which is where food waste goes, is 7%. And the landfill is just 4% now. So that's come down rapidly in the last few years since we opened the energy from waste plants. So just a quick map as well. So you can see that the Exeter ERF energy recovery facility, or sometimes we call it energy from waste or energy recovery facility. There's the one in Exeter, the one in Plymouth, and then the landfill sites we used traditionally were the big red crosses, Deepmoor landfill, Broadpath, and Heathfield. So we only use a very small amount of those now. And this is just a quick one to show how growth has changed over the years. So I don't know if you can see that, but 2014-15, we had a 1.6 growth, then it dropped by 3.2% in 2015-16, and it has wavered around quite a lot. And this is interesting because economic growth has a big impact on the amount of waste there is. And there can be all sorts of things that impact on the amount of waste that is produced. It's just interesting to see how it swings around. And also during COVID, we had a big impact. This is only for the first 2 quarters of 2021, because I don't have the full figures here, but we had a massive drop in C&I, which is commercial industrial waste. So this is again looking much wider, not just household. But we saw a corresponding increase in household waste. Well, not quite exactly the same, obviously, but we saw this big increase because people were working at home. People weren't going out for meals. They were, eating at home more. So we saw this increase in waste from the homes, whilst the business waste dropped off, and our recycling centres obviously closed for certain periods of time. So again, that waste had to drop during those times, which meant more waste was going into the bins. So it's about flows really of where waste goes. And also we've had negative impacts from COVID, such as increased littering of the sort of face masks and things as well. And we've seen increases in plastic food packaging because people are suddenly being choosing to do disposable or takeouts to try and minimize the risk of COVID. So we've had quite a few changes. And that's just a quick graph to show you how recycling has increased over time, but we have plateaued rather, as you can see. So we really need to find a way to make things go higher. And this is an interesting breakdown just by district. So if we just find South Hams, sort of halfway down, you can see that your recycling rates back in 1920 was 54.4% and had come up a little bit And you can see what the other districts have been up to as well. So East Devon's top of the list there. So they're doing very well. Exeter, the reason Exeter's so much lower is because they don't have food waste collection yet, but they are planning to bring it in, and that will make quite a big difference for them. Right, I'm conscious of time, and I'm already probably not going to quite get through everything. So I just quickly want to say about this. Sorry, what was that?
You've got 4 more minutes. Sorry.
Have I really? I thought I had 20 minutes at the beginning of this. Or have I only...
Yeah, don't worry. Give yourself 10 more minutes. That's fine.
Sorry, I thought I was told I had 20 minutes, not 10. So that's okay. Jane's got a thumbs up. That's good. So the residual bin, we do a waste analysis every few years. This was done 2017 last, because we have to know what's in the bin to manage it, and it's really staggering to see the amount of organic waste that's in there. So that's food waste, and so one of our biggest areas of tackling is food waste. I'll skip quickly though. So just following on from that, 40.8% of the contents of the residual bin, that's just the bin that, it's not the recycling that you put in your recycling bins, it's just the stuff you throw away in your black bins, or whatever colour your residual bin might be, was 40% of it was found to be recyclable, and that's the equivalent of 56,000 tonnes of material. And if everyone could recycle the most optimally, as it were, most efficiently using their scheme, then we could get a recycling rate of 71% without changing the systems at all. Just get our recycling rate up if everyone used it as efficiently as we would like them to. I mean, there are reasons why people don't use them efficiently, so that's for us to try and work out, and it's where a lot of our community and education work comes in. But obviously that cost of that 56,000 tonnes is approximately £6.7 million if it went to disposal. And we also lose money from not selling the materials, because obviously there's an income from those materials when we sell them that's estimated at £1 million there, but that will vary with markets. So you know, there's a huge interesting point there around why do people not use their recycling facilities as efficiently as we would like them to? And one of the issues is the fact that systems are not all the same wherever you go. So we are working with all the districts to try and do what we call the aligned option, to try and get everybody onto the same service. So weekly food waste, garden waste if they offer it fortnightly, dry recycling weekly, and then your residual fortnightly. Although some councils, district councils, are now going to 3 weekly, which East Devon has done, and Mid Devon and North Devon are just trialling it a little bit in small areas. So the ones that are sort of a yellowy colour are the ones that are already doing all those things, and as you know, South Hams are trying to change to this. They've had some problems. They'll get there in the end. I know they will. So gradually we'll get everybody onto the same system so that it's less confusing for people. So I just wanted to, I can't, you know, although I don't work for Southampton, I can't answer all the questions, and I'm sure you lot are pretty gemmed up on this, I'm sure, but within the presentation I thought I would just put in some links, so if you have this presentation afterwards you can go and follow them up and look at it. You can find out where your recycling goes. You can also put in a postcode and make sure you're on the right recycling system for the system, you know, because I know it's a bit variable across Southampton at the moment. And there's also a letter to the residents from the leader of the council. If you haven't already read that, that might be an interesting read for you. So I want to get onto the behavioural change bit, because that's the bit I work on really, and I love. So we do all sorts of things. So initially it was lots of road shows and things like press articles and advertising. We've increasingly doing more social media. We rely on our website a lot for getting information out. The brand originally was Don't Let Devon Go to Waste, but we tend increasingly to use Recycle Devon in a lot of our work because of social media. And I'll just go on to the next one. So this is our new website that was launched only, time flying, might be as much as 6 months ago, not quite sure, but they did a revamp on it. So if you haven't already visited the Recycle Devon website, please do. It's an excellent website, loads of information on there. Please do go and take a look, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all the usual. Apart from putting out information and talking to lots of people that way, we also have waste and recycling advisors who literally go and knock on doors and talk to people. So it's a bit blurry, sorry, this is not a very high quality image, but in 2019-2020 they spoke to, well, over 4,500 people on the doorsteps about their recycling. We're going out and actually talking to and asking them, and they actually knocked on an awful lot more doors. They knocked on over 13,500 doors, but not everyone's in or wants talk. So, but when they're there on the doorstep, they can answer the questions about recycling, and they give out what we call MPS, so mailing preference service cards. So you can sign up to the junk mail mailing preference service. And also, yeah, if they haven't got a recycling bin, then we can give out recycling bins or arrange for them to be given out. And surprising how many people don't have one. And that's obviously a barrier to recycling. They moved house, there wasn't one when they moved in. They hadn't got around to phoning the council. They needed another one because they have a big family. Lots of reasons. So lots and lots, over 4,000 have been given out that year. And that really helps people. And we work with the districts closely to target areas where we know that recycling rates might be a bit lower for some reason, or we need to talk to the public. So apart from knocking on people's doors, we go into schools. We say assemblies. We obviously haven't done any assemblies during the COVID problems because schools haven't held assemblies, but we do curriculum linked workshops, and we have swapped during these COVID times to outdoor workshops, a lot of outdoor provision, which has been good fun, although a bit chilly at times in winter. We have a huge amount of teaching resources on our website, and before COVID, and we're going to restart these after, or probably in the spring. We do school community events where we help the school to do, we do workshops during the day, and then we help the school to put on a community event and invite the parents and grandparents and carers and anyone into the school to talk about what they've been doing. And we often involve other local community groups or businesses if they've got an environmental sort of remit. We do trips to our waste management facilities. Again, COVID has meant we've had to pause them, but we're looking to restart those in the autumn term. And I mentioned we've got a website and lots of videos. I'll just see if I think my next slide. Oh yeah, so that's just the front page of the website. So this is, you can get to this from the Recycle Devon website, but it's called the zone.recycledevon. And we've got a lot of information here. There's lots of videos behind this, and lots of resources for teachers. So if you know any teachers or you're a teacher yourself, please go and have a look, because it's all curriculum linked. We have trained teachers doing this work, and you can sort of make inquiries for workshops through there and sign up for our sustainability bulletin. Actually during the whole lockdown, we also increased the amount of work we were doing for home education. So we created worksheets specifically to try and help parents and things. So we also have a Girl Guide badge and a Scout badge around Recycle Devon. Again, you can look at that on the website. If I just go back, you can see their youth groups. It's under. So if you clicked on youth groups, you could then go and download all the information about how to get your Scout group and Guide group doing this. And we've given out hundreds and hundreds of badges already. The Girl Guide one was only launched earlier this year. The Scouts one was done nearly 2 years ago now. But they've been really popular, and that's a good way of getting local community groups involved. And then we also have our community action group, Devon project. Now this is a project that's only happening in Mid Devon and Teambridge at the moment. But this is, we've actually worked with Morella from the Share Shed a bit on this, and we're hoping to work more closely with them in future. But we basically have a project where we're supporting community groups to do grassroots action locally. It started in Tiverton, where we worked a lot there in the Tiverton area, and then we gradually have grown it. Our funding is restricting us at the moment, but we basically have a member of staff who supports these groups to do all sorts of things, like setting up community fridges or food surplus cafes, to run composting days, to set up repair cafes, all sorts of things, sort of doing a swishing event. And we support them. We don't do it for them. It's about supporting community groups to do more for themselves. And so it's support with fundraising, insurance, help with media and publicity, training and skill shares is really important. We do an annual skill share event where we really encourage the groups to learn from each other as well. So we also run collaborate events. So and we are inviting people from outside of the CAG Devon area, although CAG Devon's only Mid Devon and Teambridge. One of the good things about using Zoom is you can invite people from anywhere. So you're very welcome to attend a collaborate event if you wish. You can sign up to the CAG Devon newsletter on the website, and you can find out more about what other groups are doing. And one day I'm hoping to get enough funding to stretch this across the whole of Devon somehow, because there's so much that we could do. All of our work though is focused around waste and waste reduction and reuse. However, obviously a lot of these groups do other things. So I know a lot of the groups are also doing work on wildlife and tree planting and all sorts. Right. Oh yes, and this is just a comparison of the impact report from the CAG Devon groups 1920 and 2021. So obviously we had the COVID, which impacted hugely on the events that could be held by our community groups. So back in 1920, we had 14 groups. But interestingly, by the end of the COVID time, we still had increased the number of groups we had to 20. So, it's brilliant that COVID didn't dull people's desire to do things at all and really galvanized some groups to doing more. But it was a different patch. It was a patchy picture for different groups. So the number of events obviously dropped. So we'd had run, or I say we, the community groups had run 265 events across Devon in 1920, and then during the COVID one, they could only run 85. But they still did lots of group meetings and lots of volunteer hours, and still managed to get a lot of attendees, often to things like litter picks, things like that, so that they could could be socially distanced. And then we had the Blackdown Repair Cafe did an amazing click and collect service for repairing things. There was some fantastic work. And then rerouted the Surplus Food Cafe, swapped from sort of sat down type meals to takeaways. So, they were very adaptable, some of these groups. Anyway, moving on, I've not got much more to go. The Devon Reuse Project, we have a reuse officer. We're actually just currently changing staff members because our last reuse officer has gone off to be the climate change officer, one of the climate change officers at East Devon. So we're just about to replace her. But it includes setting up reuse and repair workshops to help people develop skills so they can do more reuse, and loaning out kits such as our clothes swapping kit, which is rails and hangers and mirrors, so you can run the kit run a day really well. Give and take days. There was an online reuse directory. They've got a reuse week where we got a lot of the reuse projects to lay on events during that week. We had the big national big fix. So Catherine, our coordinator, reuse person who's just left us, she coordinated the big fix, but made it on a national level and got all the repair cafes across the country practically on the same day to run repairs, and that got some good coverage. So that was brilliant. And we've been trying to improve reuse and at our recycling centres. So we've sort of tried to make it more obvious to people where to drop things that they feel can be reused rather than just chucking them straight in the skip. So there's a huge amount of work going on there. And then we've got a new project called the Food Rescue Project, which is lottery funded, and this is just getting started. And I think you might know Emma Croft, some of you, because she's involved in your area. And the Food Rescue Project will be working to set up more community fridges, to work on gleaning, which is about volunteers rescuing the farm surplus, which is perhaps not economically, it's uneconomic to harvest. But she's working with the Devon and Cornwall gleaners on that, and she will make links between the gleaning and the community fridges, which will be really helpful. And we actually already have about at least 11 community fridges across Devon, which have just set up, either by themselves or with a bit of help from CAG Devon. But they've all been setting up, and it's a huge area, and COVID has really encouraged more people to set up community fridges. So there's a huge amount of advice and help and support for anyone who wants to do that. We've got a lot of experience in Devon between our various staff and I know Emma for this specific project. And Olio app, that's about a food sharing app. I won't go into that now, so I don't have long, but that's mostly in the Exeter area, about sharing food. And community cooking, there'll be